Yeah.
Can't hurt.
Speech about how we should stop.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Who's gonna be on who's? Yeah. Your life.
Oh,
I like your shirt.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
This is they give me so many clothes, and they're nice.
what is it? Well, I can't see from here.
Well, I mean, it's top, it's gathered over
Oh.
here.
Oh,
It's
EY.
nice fabric, but all of them have the logo on it.
That's
It's all right.
They're always,
You only put a piece of black tape on it if you really wanted to.
that's good marketing.
Good marketing, good marketing. Especially the places I go.
We're good to go? Okay, we're gonna call the special council meeting of Friday, March 7th, or March, Russian things, February 17th to order.
Airtime,
Yes.
Allworder,
Yes.
Deacon,
Yes.
Press,
Here.
Steinbrink,
Here.
Turner, yes, Walsh.
Yes.
First thing on the agenda is resolution 2023-9. Chip,
Yes, this is a resolution authorizing the mayor and the clerk to enter into a lease with Gavi's River LLC for a coffee shop at 1501 Chagrin River Road and declaring an emergency. And I'd like to move to first suspend the rules because of the urgency of this. And I
Construction timeline.
Airtime,
No.
Allworder,
Yes.
Deacon,
yes.
Press,
Yes.
Steinbrink.
Yes.
Turner. Yes. Welsh.
Yes.
So I now move to approve resolution 2023-9.
Second.
Airtime.
Why voting?
Yeah, this is now, we suspended and now this is.
The first was a suspension.
Well, can I discuss it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I listened to you for 2 hours on Tuesday, so I'm going to take 3 minutes.
Yeah, no, I thought we probably would have a little discussion. That's the
I'll
most.
speak quickly. I want to put this transaction, look at it in 2 ways. One is the content of the deal. The other is the context of the deal, i.e. all the issues going on around the deal. And I want to back up at least a year when it became clear that we were going to have the Cindy Halley space relinquished back to us. And since then, there's been discussion with Gavi's about using that space for private dining. About last summer, I think that was. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I think the reason it fell apart was we couldn't get our heads around giving what we might call prime real estate for private use. It wasn't going to be seen to be attracting people to the village for make it a bit more lively, a bit more vitalized, which is what the comprehensive plan is talking about a little bit. And then in my own head, I said, well, maybe we should be out there as best we can, trying to find alternative uses for this space. And at the time, we weren't clear that we could use Burton Court for commercial reasons. There were some concerns about the donors and their preferences. But there was a sort of creeping inevitability in my mind that we were going to finish up here with a deal with Gavi's. And the problem with dealing with Gavi's is their objective in life is 90% making money. The village is a little bit schizophrenic. Money isn't the most important thing. The other important thing is the feeling it gives to the village and the ambience and any cultural change. So when you're negotiating with somebody who's after the money and you're not, you better be pretty sharp on the numbers. And the way to do that, and I've sold a lot of businesses, as you know, and one of the things you have to do is either find somebody to bid on it or fabricate somebody to bid on it. Because otherwise, Gavi knows they've got a clear shot at this thing. And this inevitability in my mind has manifested itself today. That's one piece of the context. The other piece of the context is that I'm very uncomfortable approving this, voting for this coffee shop lease until I'm completely clear about the other components that we're talking about behind the scenes that no one knows about. And that bothers me because we've got a comprehensive plan in process. It's about to address the village centre. We're doing this as if the comprehensive plan didn't really exist, except we've grabbed the words coffee shop out of the proceedings so far. But the coffee shop wasn't about a coffee shop. It was about finding ways of making the village more attractive, the village centre more attractive to people. And so it's not the fact that they're serving coffee, it's are they going to attract enough people? Now, it's clear to me that Gavies aren't confident that they will, otherwise they'd have given us a longer deal than 1 year. And so I'm concerned that the work of the Comprehensive Plan Committee, Advisory Committee, is being basically ignored. And so I'm very concerned that we're being rushed into this thing for reasons I don't fully understand. You can talk about construction schedules and all that. But we're a government, and when a for-profit deals with the government, they've got to put up with the government's rules. And that's why I voted against suspending the rules, because villagers have had no opportunity whatsoever to chip into this conversation. And much less, they don't even know anything about the other two things we're talking about, either be it the Burton Court downstairs or the expansion upstairs. So I'm going to vote against this motion because I think the process is appalling. And I think it goes back to over a year ago, Chip, where we had the Cindy Halley lease came up, the post office came up, and the way it was dealt with was a shambles. Remember, we were forced into taking decisions which were not necessary. They could have been done in a more orderly fashion. So when I ran for council, I said I'm most interested in process, clear analysis, and transparency. And I think we're avoiding all three of those things if we take this decision today. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Well, I think your point's really well taken, except I'm not representing Gavies, but I was in on the initial go around when we had a condo group sending mass mailing to the village to destroy the downtown. And I stuck my head out and said, let's buy it. And we had a lot of money left from the time when people die, it goes into those funds. And everybody fought me. I mean, they really beat me up. And but public opinion survived. And then we had to find somebody to do this, and no one would do it because the village had a group of people. The restaurant, when we had the other one there, the Fox and everything, it smelled, and I mean, it was just, they were coming out of the woodwork, and so it was a terrific gamble, wasn't it?
Well, and also speak to the fact that we did a survey at that time what people wanted in the downtown, and I have to tell you, in that survey, if one thing came up, and that was the kind of the direction that it ended up, the space where Sarah's was looking at, was a coffee shop. If you remember on that survey, that goes way back.
Yeah. And then Sarah's put that in, as I recall, and lost her shirt on it because there wasn't much interest in using it. So they were paying for a lot of employees there and some other things. So they came back and said, do you mind if we shut that down and see how things go? And, here we are back today, so, 360, looking at, doing it again. It's a gamble on their part. They were a gamble when they went in there. They put a lot of money into that building.
God bless them. That's their business.
And
taking risks.
the restaurant is a super success.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. They say they cry poor, and that's business. With the post office, I've been trying to save that post office now for 20 years because they want to get rid of us. They wanted to move to, in fact, you saved it. I mean, I don't know how you dealt with that guy. They wanted to combine.
Deal with anybody.
Yeah, they
The
wanted
fact that there was no response from the postal service for
Right.
months.
Oh,
That broke them.
And
That
that's
broke
how
them.
they,
That's all you need to know.
that's their
Yeah,
technique.
they try
They
to-
get you really mad, and you don't want to
Yeah.
deal with them, and then everybody's fighting with each other, and then they walk away from it and close it. And that's their technique. And God love you. You sat with them and you finally nailed a guy and loved this, and we got it. And I walked in that post, how many emails have I sent out over the years?
They're still trying, let me tell you,
Well,
right, Sandra?
can
They're
we
still
get back?
trying.
Can we get off the post office for a minute?
Every time I get my mail,
Sorry.
I say, are you closing today? And they'll tell me, and we'll send a mass email out, and the villagers all combine, and
So,
they write
one-
and they call all the people and
Ed,
Yeah.
we got to get back to the coffee shop.
all right.
So could I ask,
so-
that they were my questions on, my observations on context. I now have to talk about content of this agreement.
Okay.
And in my own head, I was trying to convince myself that this agreement absolutely stands alone in that any connection to the other deals, we should behave as if it doesn't exist.
Okay.
And yet in the term option renew, it says something along the lines, or exactly, I read it, to the event the lessee extends the current term of the lease of the Sarah's lease, that's the lease we already have. Before July 31st, 2025, that's the expiration of that current lease. As a result of making improvements to the Sarah's restaurant premises. What's that? Is that a condition?
No, that's
Or take it out? Doesn't need to be there.
just a reference to that lease.
Yeah, but
To get them to run concurrently.
yeah, I mean, it's saying this is not anything, this has got nothing to do with the result of improvements in Sarah's,
Okay,
if it's truly separable.
no, let's. If the SARS lease is changed for whatever the reasons cited in there, this lease gives the lessee the right to adopt those terms.
Absolutely. So why do we need to
But-
put this thing in about modifications?
Because that's the logic for why that would change. That's what's contemplated as a possibility.
No, I mean, the main reason it would change is that they extend the lease for 10 years or they exercise a renewal early. That kind of thing is what I was thinking of. Not construction.
This wouldn't even come into play until after the first year. Am I correct?
This doesn't impact this lease at all. If
Okay.
Take
they
it out,
change their
take it
lease-
out.
No, it's got to be in there because they want that option.
They've got it.
That language gives them that.
The language referring to the existing lease gives them that.
No,
So there's maybe a few extra words, but at this
Or fewer,
point,
or
is it?
fewer.
no, David,
Is it-
let's be
Is it
clear.
that?
Right
critical?
now,
Give them
these
every other-
terms line up with the lease terms of the current SARS lease.
In terms of timing and rent renegotiation, I agree, and extensions.
Yes.
It's got nothing to do with construction, which this talks about.
So what's the big harm of leaving that phrase in there?
Well, why is it in there? That's my point.
Because
It's-
that's
it's
what
a
it
link.
referenced.
It's a link.
Because that was language. So really, we need to change
I've
to
made
take
my
it out.
point. I've made my
It's a
point.
negotiated deal.
It's the what?
So you gotta go with
Oh,
some of what they want and some of what
Okay,
you
fine,
want,
go ahead.
right?
I'm just trying to make sure.
It doesn't make this any more linkage than not. That's all.
What I am worried about is that if I were in Gavi's shoes, I would be linking this deal to the others. I would say these should all be committed at the same time. That's what I would say. And
No, they were very clear that these are two separate things because they wanted.
I mean, your point's very well taken, but I think we're getting some point where we're distrusting Gavi's, and I think the history of working with them has been phenomenal.
Quite the
And I think
opposite.
we have to-
This is not about distrust. This is about being sensible about your transaction.
I mean.
I've worked in business many years, and you always have to worry about the worst thing that could happen, not be excited about the best thing that could happen.
But
But David-
they're constantly all. I'm sorry.
That
They're
language is.
constantly
Go ahead, Lori.
Yeah. We've worked on deals together in our past, but you also have to have a balance in everything that you do. It's a small space. It's like selling a little product line or something. It's not that easy. You want to make sure that you make a deal because it's important. It's sitting empty.
Yeah.
This is what people want. And the balance is between, the business side and also what the community wants. And so you just have to kind of, take that approach. And you have to do that in a deal too, or you might lose your deal or, upset the other side,
Oh, yeah, sure.
whatever. So I think this is really a good balance and it really seems what everyone wants. So
And we're giving,
Yeah, another
my last point, my only
I think
point.
we're
really is that
good. I really do.
this is tiny. The put right. It's the first anniversary, right?
It's that day, the first anniversary period.
It doesn't say first.
But there's reference to their first date of opening. That was a concern I had, that the language didn't appear that they had that option every year. It was a one-time option.
A one
correct,
option.
After the
And
first,
that's my
after the date they opened.
That's my
Yeah,
point.
once they open, correct.
So sublime to the ridiculous, there are two observations on the
Okay.
content of the agreement.
I guess I'd like to make a summary. First of all, as you mentioned, this space became available a year ago. We have talked in 7 council meetings about this space and more than twice mentioned that we were talking about a possible coffee shop. We decided as a council that it is best to talk about details in executive session. But we have been very clear when we come out of those to say that we're in discussions on a coffee shop. The fact that we're now coming up with a lease on this space, if there is a resident that is shocked that we suddenly have a possible use for this space, then they've been living under a rock for the last year. So I think you're wrong on what we haven't been transparent. I think we've been unbelievably transparent on this to the extent we can without getting into the inner workings of a detailed lease. I, for one, do not think it is up to the villagers to detail the individual aspects of a lease. That is what they give us. That's what they vote us for.
I'm just saying.
I didn't
know.
look, you talked, I want to talk.
Okay.
The second thing is, if there's a degree of urgency here, as this picture's emerged, I will also disagree with you that we have to wait for the final of the comprehensive plan to find out that our villagers are interested in a coffee shop. She mentioned it from 20 years ago.
We have that.
The
lead.
survey of
Survey.
residents was overwhelming. The mention of coffee shop, it came up in neighborhood meetings. So we don't need to wait for the final print to know that if we could come up with a coffee shop. And I think there was a strong sense before we ever embarked on a comprehensive plan. Yes, we're all making a judgment here that when a comprehensive plan is all done, that there's going to be a paragraph in there that says, under no circumstances should we ever think of a coffee shop in the village. I think the odds of that are about 0.001%. So I think we can safely make a decision. I know that's tough without perfect data and a process that's so exhaustive that we could take another 5 years to make a decision. But at this point, the other reason that we've sped it up is that when we started talking with them and sat with Gavi's and said one of our top goal is to try to have lunch, to have a coffee shop, and to see if there's things, because they have said that with the impact of COVID, they are having financial challenges in the wintertime in particular. That explored the Burton Court space and explored the coffee shop. They said what happened coincidentally is a valued employee of theirs runs a coffee shop and is getting out of that coffee shop, has the equipment. And there was a window here, if we were interested, that they would be interested in starting up a coffee shop. That timing is running out. That was the request. Why to break this up? It's a 1-year experiment. I know some feel there might be risk at that. Obviously, Gavi's thinks there might be risk, but it's a 1-year experiment. So I think the urgency is warranted. I agree with you. It'd been nice to play this out a little bit longer. But it's not that we haven't been hiding it from the residents. So I think this has been generally well publicized. And if there's a degree of urgency, it's because of the timing of getting this going with that employee.
And
So-
construction.
Well, I know we got to do the construction.
You know, some of our guys, winter's the time for our guys to,
So I'm not,
Right.
we can continue to refine our process. I think we've made some very good, a lot of progress because we've had good executive sessions now. To be quite frank, I was upset a year ago and we had the leases dropped in our lap and expected to approve it that day because it was in a rush. It's a
Absolutely.
post office thing. So what have we done now? We're having executive sessions. You're seeing drafts lay out. We're going through the terms. We're having discussions. And if we can do a better job of communicating to the residents, then let's keep working on that. But it's that careful balance of trying to work through the details, which I don't think is something that should be in the public eye while keeping them informed. So I think we've done a pretty good job on this. Can we improve? I'm sure we can continue to improve. So.
And Gavi's coffee is terrific.
Mike,
I have a question. I unfortunately, I haven't read the final lease. I was concerned in one of our executive sessions that we were being a little bit too prescriptive on telling them what they had to do, how many soups and so on. And is that still in there? I mean, if this is an experiment, shouldn't we give them some flexibility? So that they can do whatever they have to do. We want it to be a success, I presume.
That was their
That's what
language.
they- Yeah. That was what they put in.
That was their
The,
minimum.
Well,
I think it's
Well,
the
and
minimum.
I think it also guarantees for us that, you know, what they're doing to make this successful.
Right.
And they're
Yeah,
good.
all I remember, for example, at one point, we talked about requiring 3 soups.
We didn't, that's what they offered.
Oh, all right. I mean, I'm reluctant to tie their hands on what they
Yeah.
need to do to make it a success. I'd like to see the thing succeed.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, let me just play that one back to a certain extent. Those terms of use is a requirement. And if they aren't doing that, it's a potential, gives rise to default.
Understood.
So the soups and the prepared sandwiches and salads is the lunch component. Now, it's not as much lunch as we want. You know, we'd still like to see a full lunch service, but at least it opens that door. So it creates more activity. So from my vantage point, that's the language they put in. And I feel that that's actually to our benefit as far as trying to have at least some degree of a lunch service.
Well, they did extend that too and included other things like pastry and whatnot, rolls and whatnot. So this was kind of their minimum that they thought they could do. And I think they're going to add to it from what I get out of
And
it.
it's 6 a.m. to 3 p.m.,
Right.
which is more than,
Right.
yeah,
Fresh
that's-
coffee and pastry. Right.
When I opened this packet, I was really excited to see that we're not competing with Gavi's either. This is Gavi's, so that this coffee shop will complement their
Right.
operation versus compete. which we
And
don't.
another important point is that their intent is to open up the space so you can take your coffee and pastries and go into one of the tables in the dining room.
Right.
So,
It's beautiful.
and of course, in the
I'm
summer, the
excited
use of the
about it.
patio. So, I'm concerned whether it's really going to work, but I don't think
Keep
we're
our
going
fingers crossed.
hugely out on a limb here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I think they have confidence in this and hope that it
Yeah.
works.
yeah.
been there, done that. I mean, they're risk takers and they're good at what they do. So
To your point, Michael,
we can always fail. you know.
excuse me, I'm sorry. To your point, if there's something else they'd like to do, they come and talk to us about it and we say, yes, if
Sure.
it's going to make it
Yeah,
successful,
we
we'll
don't
do
have
that.
to,
So
we
they-
could deal
need-
with
need
it
to
down
be
the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to give it every chance. I mean,
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I agree.
I don't want to force them into a condition where they give up.
Absolutely.
If we can succeed. Now, we all know that everybody seems to want a coffee shop. We don't know what that means. If somebody wants a Luna or a Starbucks, that's not what we're offering. If somebody wants a community, a place where you can have community and meet with neighbors and what have you, this will do that.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure exactly what
6 to 3.
what it means that they
Perfect.
want the
Right.
coffee shop. We'll find out. We'll see if the experiment works.
yeah,
Well, and we've had
It
all
does.
this, time over months, you know, I went back and looked and I got as far as June of last year and we maybe even started talking about it sooner than that. And we haven't come up with any other good alternative.
That's my.
Well, that's David. I guess I'll bristle a little bit at that. So we probably had half a dozen people through the space. It's 501 square feet. It's effectively a broom closet.
Yeah, that's really small.
Yeah.
And I would say that the village center and the Mills building exists, in my opinion, to serve the 2,200 residents of the village, not the 10 or 15 or 20,000 people that go into Sugar Falls on a daily basis or go to Pinecrest. So this would be much different if this was not a known operator and we had some sort of an unknown commodity coming in here to operate this. And so I get a little concerned that this is paralysis from analysis. And we keep looking and looking and looking. And meanwhile, is the ship heading into a reef? And so we've got to run the operations of the village. We've got space that's been open for over a year that we've had difficulty getting leased, and it's not for lack of trying. It's because the village of Gates Mills. And frankly, I don't think residents want us to be Chagrin Falls. I don't think residents want
They don't.
people from all over the place coming in here. They want a place for residents. And so we've been elected by residents to run the affairs of the village. Sometimes that means with imperfect information. And everyone at this table is aware of what happened and why the previous deal with Sarah's was pulled. I'm not going to relitigate all of this, but I look at this and say we've got breakfast or coffee, we've got lunch, and the investment from the village on a monetary basis is relatively small because these are improvements that would need to be made to the space regardless if the
Exactly.
coffee shop is successful or not. We got to have running water, you got to have sewer, electricity in that space. So if this doesn't work out, this isn't like the village spent $20,000 on a cooler that all of a sudden we have to try to find someplace to liquidate.
I guess Cindy Holly too, if anybody wants to listen, she was very much against like putting a Howard Hannon in there that would not draw traffic to her
Right.
resident, her
Right,
business. And this will, and she's excited to have another retailer in there versus.
Yes.
And to have lunch for her customers.
Overall, I think this is a positive for our village as a whole.
Well, and it's 6 days a week,
Right.
so it's even Saturday.
Yeah,
If
Saturdays.
If the
great.
gamble would fail, we put a nail in our foot, but you know, I think we've got a really good shot at this.
No nails in it. No nails. Let's go.
So.
No injuries.
Can I call it?
Okay, I'll
quits?
second.
You second
Yeah.
it. Adcock,
No,
Allworder,
Yes.
Deacon,
Yes.
Press,
Yes.
Steinbrink,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes,
Welsh.
Yes.
Thank you. Next is executive session.
Well, here's the question. Where the next topic is really to authorize the mayor to proceed to get professional design services related to possibly modifying the Burton Court space. This all relates to the framework that we've been talking with Gavies about and working through with them on how all that could come together. If we talked about this before, I think I'll just, without going into executive session, I'll just say what we talked about. I have talked about in the past, there was a question about some language regarding assignment of a lease. There was some talk about possibly changing that just in talking through terms. That was all resolved. The language wouldn't change compared to what's currently in the SARS lease. So that issue was brought up and is back off the table. So the question would be, do we want to go back in and talk further about the overall terms? One might argue that we're the ones embarking on a risk here, that we're going to go to the next level of detail, which would be helpful so we can make an informed decision. That's the cost to us, so that we can go and get bids and know what's really at stake. Gavies may be doing some work in the meantime. I don't know that we're not obligating them to do any work at this time period. We're just going to spend some money.
Are we confident we need to go into executive session?
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
Because this is still pretty conceptual.
Right. And so I just put it on here, asked to have it on just in case we wanted to go back into the details. Let me just finish my logic for a second. If we were to approve this authorization to the mayor, I will commit to go and visit with Gavies one more time, either this afternoon or Monday, and just review our conversations on the framework that we've talked about. And if there is any concern or nervousness on their part, then I will put a halt, tell the mayor, don't proceed any further, because if we show up and say, hey, everything is exactly as we thought, and we've done our detailed work, and they say, yeah, but, so it's a good faith that if we're going to go spend the money, then it's reasonably good commitment that we think the framework that we're working towards, nobody's obligated to that, but, we've worked on it. But I will take on the role of, if that's okay with council, to since I've been working with them and with their lawyer to reconfirm that framework, if nothing else of great consequence changed. And we found exactly the same picture, and these were the terms that ended up in a lease, that they would be comfortable with it, not say, well, upon reflection, we really need to do this or that. That would change have wasted our money. So I think we're the ones taking the risk here. So I don't think I had thoughts that, we want to get to, both sign a term sheet or whatever. I don't think we need to do that because we're the ones taking the risk here. So.
Well, we're also from a different viewpoint, if you will, or I'm looking at it, that we're improving Burton Court. So if everything fell apart in all directions, we'll have a better rentable part of the building.
Well, at least we'll have a plan to understand what that
Exactly.
could entail, et cetera.
Mhm.
So I don't know that we need to do an executive session, but it's on here if people wanted to get into detail.
Well, I certainly agree.
Todd, what do you-
with
What do you?
Well, I don't think, I mean, it's up to you whether you have an executive session. I don't think we're into the details and the trade secrets of Gavi's that we really justifies executive session. But that's up to you.
Can we ask some
And
questions?
I will say one thing, the reason there's $50,000 in there, that's not that it's going to cost that much, but that's the limit under
Yeah,
the state code.
Yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay.
We're figuring it'll be
Yeah.
much less than that, but that's the limit.
If we're gonna discuss it, we probably should move in second.
Oh, well, okay, we were
Yeah,
talking about
point that.
executive session, but I guess at this point, so.
Suspend the rules too.
So I move to authorize the mayor to engage professional design services for the purpose of construction at the village's property at 1501 Chagrin River Road in an amount not to exceed $50,000. And I move to suspend the rules. So
You don't need to.
You don't need it on a motion.
sorry.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Add time.
Well, no, do we want any further discussion
Yeah.
at this point?
I think we ought to let people know what in concept, what in a big picture kind of concept way, what we're thinking about,
Right.
what's this money going to do? I think we can do that without violating anything that's proprietary to Gavi's, and I'd feel more comfortable the earlier we start, going public with what we're thinking, the better, in my view.
So you and I talked about this, and I think that was an excellent point.
I think you can do that very easily.
And I will also tell you that I, have run into a couple of people who have talked to the Gavi's people and seem to know as much as any of us.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, that may be unfair because maybe, who knows whether it was them, and I'm not trying to suggest, but because I happen to know they're very excited about it. So the framework for public record and what we're exploring would be to effectively add a second floor onto Burton Court. It would mean taking off the existing sloped roof, a flat ceiling into the first floor of Burton Court. Otherwise, that doesn't change. It just gets to be a flat ceiling. The space up above, looking from River Road, conceptually would be the same kind of windows that you see on the first floor, except they go completely across because there's an entrance on the first floor, et cetera. They'd actually be something that could open up in the summer. They're anticipating having a little bit of a cantilever out a little bit over the front of the existing space. But it would be looking out over the north courtyard patio out onto the greens and basically towards the river. That space, I don't know space-wise how it equates to the existing upstairs dining room and bar. Visually, and I just don't have the measurements. Visually, it's about more, I think a little more than doubling of that space. The intent would be obviously a full high ceiling and then they'd knock down the wall that would then be so that it's one big room up there. And where the current bar is, that would be gone, and they put in a whole new, much more extensive bar. That's the main benefit, plus a different type of dining. So it would be bar and a different type of dining up there. So that whole room, as we currently see it, would be dramatically new. And if you were in that upstairs dining room where the wall, it's about even with the front of the bar. is where the wall would stop and then be open up into the other room. In other words, that whole area would be open. So the current construction of the back from the upper parking lot, there's actually a stairway from the lower Burton, from the Burton Court space in the back of Burton Court that goes up and out, a separate entrance from the current entrance coming into the Gavi's from the back parking lot. They're envisioning that will become the new entrance into this upstairs space. So it's a direct access into the bar dining room. They think this is just, that this has been their vision all along. I was kind of surprised in discussions when we tried to explore options. I thought they'd be coming up with ideas for the existing Burton Court. Actually, the architects that have already, we've had some preliminary discussions, say this will actually be easier than some of the things that they were thinking about doing. So, it could represent a substantial more meeting place for the village. I think for any of us that go there for dinner, it's always nice to run into residents. We had dinner there the other night and I turned around and one of the members of the advisory committee, was there just to chat with he and his wife.
And former residents were there. We had a lot of people.
Right. And
It
so,
was quite
and it's
interesting.
a pretty small space. On the first floor, it's always nice to go in and have, see somebody eating at another table, but they're eating at another table. You just say, hey, how are you? You don't go up and interrupt the whole thing. If you're at a bar area, you tend to get into conversations with other people. So I think this is my personal opinion. I think it could be quite an additional center of activity for the residents and guests or, visitors to the village.
Now, for wheelchair access and everything, that's why we put that elevator in the front, which I understand is being used as a storage area or something.
No, upstairs it's a storage area, but we found it was never used, so we
No.
put in a bathroom downstairs. There's a bathroom in there now.
If somebody must use that back entrance, there's still a way to get up there with that elevator, I believe.
Well, no elevator. The upstairs access would be through the back door.
Is it going to be wheelchair access?
Yeah.
Pull right up.
Well, I mean,
Roll right in.
we're not into
Let me add to this.
Yeah.
Let me add to this, since we are recording this, that I've talked to the manager of the librarian or the library and kind of made her aware, both Sarah's and the village are taking into consideration that they use the lower level for programming as they do the community house and the patio. Just depends on what the programming is with our camp and whatnot. So I want everybody in the village not to think the library things are going away, because they're not.
Yeah, the library, I'm on the board there and they're always worried that they're allowed to use it or not because they like
Yes,
using it.
we've talked all
And
about
This
that.
this will give a nicer flow for the library people to have their meetings and,
And
courses and
the
whatever.
terms that we've talked about, Gavi's fully understands and have no issue with what the library use is very predictable. They actually
Yeah.
lay their
Oh, yeah.
calendar out way in advance.
A whole year.
None of that changes.
No,
And
no,
we've
they're
tried to
very
make
nice
sure
people.
that everybody's on board on that front. So,
don't we have access to it too for
Yes,
village
yes.
events?
Do we, so it's basically, and we're going to improve the Mills building, which we own, by
Correct.
expanding the footprint on the second floor.
Correct.
And the good news is that Gabby's is prepared to take a lease on that space if it makes economic sense for us to go ahead and we decide to go ahead.
Yes.
Now, are we going to enter any kind of a letter of intent, binding or otherwise, with Gabby's at this stage of the game, or does that come later?
I haven't thought of if we need to. We have the terms. We can try that. That's what I said. What I was just suggested a few minutes ago was we have the terms. Okay, we've been exchanging those back and forth. We're in agreement on those, to my knowledge. It's along the lines that we've talked about at council. So I was going to go and sit with David again, with Dave Gromolski again with that sheet and just go through again and say, Dave,
Good.
if we get to the point from our side that we're ready to go and everything on this page is exactly as it's written, you can't come and say, well, upon second thought. So Now, you know, that's as good as his word at that point. So
Respond to Michael, that I think a letter of intent is a good idea. They always are, in my view, and binding or not. But I'm very concerned that we're committing to a rent on some space we haven't even seen. I wonder if the rent needs to be part of the letter of intent. It's just a question.
well, there's two parts to that. Your first is saying we should go into a letter of intent.
I think so, yeah.
Yes, David, what do you mean by the space we haven't seen?
Well, we don't know what it's going to cost.
Oh, you're talking about from a schematic standpoint.
But I'm
with
just
the-
saying, how much are we going to spend on this?
Well, that's why
Well, I think
we're going out.
general idea what the number is.
That's why.
He's
yeah.
uncomfortable agreeing on the lease rate without knowing what the cost of the build out is. Because you don't know whether you got a good return or not. I think. Is that
Oh,
what
and
you're saying?
yes, absolutely fair question. I don't know that we can.
So maybe a letter of intent, if we do one, doesn't need to actually have the rent in it.
Well, I think, isn't the answer to that, if the
Maybe.
build out is too much
Costly.
to pay out, the lease doesn't pay it out, then we don't do it, right?
Or we cut back. We
That's what we
cut back.
renegotiate it or something.
That's why we need. the
That's why
drawing.
this motion is for the drawing.
Yeah,
Sure.
so that
I'm
gets
just
us
saying-
started down that
Yeah.
path, so we have a better understanding.
Just saying, if we do
before
a
go.
letter of intent, do we put the rent in there or not? That's my question.
We're not going to know it yet.
We're not gonna know it.
Well, we've discussed it. We've
Sorry,
discussed
Chip, I think it's hard to know. I think generally we know where rent will be, but I think I wonder if that opens us up to too many issues. Well, you said it was going to be this and now it's got to be that. So I think the LOI, maybe it's just general terms and I don't know that I'd be in favor of a specific number being in there because I think we've got to have a firmer grasp of what the full.
Just like Chip said before, I mean, like, who knew COVID was gonna come and we accepted a agreement and then all of a sudden everything went down the tube. So
Well,
you don't know.
Okay, I hear you guys, but the way we framed it currently, we have a range in there based on, you know, very crude initial estimates from a couple of different architects on the.
Excuse me, Dip, does that include the $50,000?
Yes,
So the top number includes the $50,000 expenditure.
Yes.
well, whatever the.
Whatever the
charge
amount
It's
is.
part of the
yes.
total.
That's part of
It's
the.
part of the total, okay.
Yes,
And it's
So-
village assets, so it's not like we're gonna.
I thought it was what I felt very important in the discussions with Gavi's was to see what their implicitly, what the economics would imply or look like to them. And so when we arrived at the number we did, that gave me confidence that they see value in this. And if all of these numbers came in exactly, that on the surface, it looks reasonable to us. And so if we took that out in a letter of intent, again, it's just good faith. That doesn't mean either party couldn't change. But if the numbers came in as we've laid them out and we went and sat and he said, well, yeah, that's all fine. But gosh, you know, reality is, you know, COVID hit again or whatever, and I can only afford X versus Y, then we've wasted some money. So now.
Why doesn't the law director ask them if they want a letter of intent? You may want to just go with goodwill.
Well-
They've been there for so long.
I can, look, I mean, we can easily do that. We've got the term sheet, you know, you can probably draft it. We can,
Unless you've got a penalty clause or something in a letter of intent, then it is just good faith. So
But it
You know,
memorializes that.
it does memorialize people, you know, sign
Piece of
something, they
paper,
tend to
right?
stick to it
Sure.
more.
Right.
No question, but it buys you a little bit.
Sure.
You know.
Vice momentum as well.
Mhm.
This is exciting.
I would.
Can you go to Gavi's, when you have your meeting with Gavi's, can you say, look, we hope that with the lease rate we've already talked about, it'll all make sense for us, but we don't know that yet because we haven't actually done the architectural build out. But just give them a little warning up front that we don't know how it's going to turn out, how much it's going to cost till we do a bit of engineering and a bit of architectural work.
Exactly.
And that warning can be reflected in.
In the
LOI.
document, right.
Exactly.
And that's always the case a lot of times when you go down the path in a transaction, that things change.
Could I suggest maybe there's two things that are coming out if I'm hearing it. I would like to start moving forward to get these engineering drawings. It's going to take 90 to 120 days. We have to get bids. We know the supply chain issues. I don't know where they stand in today's economy. They guess they're getting better, but I don't think they're perfect. So I don't think it's the greatest risk that we're taking here. I think we have the possibility of a very exciting next step. So to me, the first question is, do we want to give her the authorization? We've got to go get quotes for the professional, for the architect, and get that process underway. I can, at the same time, go and work on a term sheet. We can obviously have another council meeting to review that and acknowledge or whatever that, but I guess I'd still like to try to give the mayor authorization to get going on the architecture.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because that will inform your letter of intent too, the
Yeah.
drawings. So.
You have, we have a motion and a second, correct?
We do. Chip made the motion and Ed seconded it.
Okay, so we can ask for a vote on that.
Anton.
Yes.
Allworther.
Yes.
Deacon.
Yes.
Press.
Yes.
Steinbrink.
Yes.
Turner.
Yes.
Welsh.
Yes.
Okay,
Great,
and
thank
I
you.
accept and I'll, again, 99% of the work on a term sheet is already done. I will talk with Dave Vermelski. If he's in agreement, then I'll turn it over to their lawyer and ours, and they'll come up with a letter of intent. And we'll pass that around and
That's a nice job.
Yeah.
So let's make one observation there, if I may.
Sure. Really appreciate all the work.
This morning, we tried to ask tough questions and make the process demanding. And I think that's part of our job. And I don't want you to take any personal offense at that. What I do want to say, though, is I compliment you on all the work you've done, which is enormous amount of work you've done on this particular thing. Because I've done deals myself which are consuming. Absolutely. So don't take it personally. I'm not arguing with you. I'm arguing against the ideas. And I congratulate you on all the work you've done and continue to do.
well, David, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks.
A lot of work.
Craig.
I accept your challenge on process. I think we're not BP, so,
Thank God we're not. I wouldn't be here if we were.
I understand. So I think we've made some progress on it, but doesn't mean we can't continue to figure out ways to do it better.
Sure.
This whole space question in the village, there's one thing about process and everything else, and there's another thing on the building that we own and.
Part of the problem is it was designed for office space, not
Commercially.
not
Not what we.
By the way, that-
restaurant or anything else.
That is another editorial comment of me. I think the restaurant people would tell you that it's amazing that they do what they do in that space because it's kind of shoehorned in, and
Yes.
by giving them more space, both first and second, don't lose sight of that. From their standpoint, this is quite an expansion. Part of it's, they intended, they say private dining, and the other parts for the upstairs with a bar, but this is a pretty big step for them.
Oh, yeah.
It's much better than the little gas station.
Don't give away all the secrets. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so
All right, thanks.
if there's nothing else, a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Anton.
Yes.
Allworther.
Yes.
Deacon.
Yes.
Press.
Yeah.
Steinbrink.
Yes.
Turner.
Yes.
Welsh.
Thank you all for Friday morning.
Thank you. Thank you, Todd, for